This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Welcome, Alphas. Thanks for joining us. We have a great show for you today. Our special guest is Kathy Roth-Douquet, who is the founder and CEO of Blue Star Families. Amongst a long list of tremendous badass accomplishments, she's an award-winning author, attorney, military family advocate, and commenter on patriotism, civil military affairs, the value of service, and the experience of military families. Now, there is so much more to this gal, and I'm really looking forward to our chat with her, Joe.
I am too. And I hate that Adam is in Mexico City training for the hot dog eating world championships that are taking place in Switzerland in October.
I know. I hear that because they didn't have enough hot dogs, they're using rat meat though. So I'm hoping it doesn't do a really terrible number on his gut.
He's told me that he's been training with rat meat primarily for the last 4 months. So I'm not surprised by that. I'm super excited. But okay, Alphas, please stick around. We'll be back with Kathy Roth-Douquet right after the break.
If you're a retired uniformed service member, maintaining a healthy smile is mission critical to enjoying your next phase of life. That's why Blue Cross Blue Shield FEP Dental is committed to supporting the dental health of those who have served our nation. They have a network with dentists in all 50 states, and you'll pay nothing for in-network preventative care cleanings, exams, and x-rays. And with open season for enrollment starting soon, now they want you to see what the benefit of Blue can do for you. You can learn more at bcbsfepdental.com.
How's it going, Alphas? Today we are joined by Kathy Roth-Douquet, founder and CEO of Blue Star Families. Kathy, welcome. I'm a pro. Welcome to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
It's super to be here. Thanks for having me, Joe and Stacy.
Thanks, Kathy.
Pro Joe. Sorry.
Well, yeah, only sometimes though.
No, not right now.
Kathy, welcome. And it's so great to have you. When I was researching for this podcast and to have the opportunity to chat with you, I found out that you are a 24-year Marine Corps spouse, that you actually went through 4 deployments, 9 moves, you've got 2 kids. Where all were you stationed?
Yeah, we were stationed in 3 continents, 4 countries, and 5 states. Wow. I like saying that. Yeah, so we were started in DC, went to Okinawa, San Diego, back to DC, back to San Diego, North Carolina, London, South Carolina, Germany, and then back to Virginia.
Okay, is that where you're at now, Virginia?
And yeah, my husband retired after 30 years in the Marine Corps. After 16 years of moving around with him, then he retired, and we've been settled here since then.
That's nice.
In Virginia, that's where that was it. You were like, Virginia's good. We'll just stop here.
Put some roots down.
You get a little away from the city, and it's wonderful. Virginia,
it's the best state in the union. I got to tell you.
I'm glad you feel that way.
Perfect. You got the outdoor activities, but you're right there close to the capital and business.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So a lot of emphasis is obviously naturally put on the military member. 24 years in the Marine Corps, that's a lot, but not a lot of emphasis is put on the military spouse. And there's a great deal that goes on behind the scenes. Moving a family to different continents with 2 kids is quite an ordeal. So those experiences must have been a big proving ground for what you're doing now with Blue Star Families. Can you talk to me a little bit about what those experiences were like for you? What was it like to get the orders, the stress, what that felt for you in those moments? And can you tell me about how those experiences maybe were the preamble to what you're doing and how they impact you now?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Stacey. I really appreciate it. And appreciate a chance to talk to you and your audience, because the American Legion's awesome.
Mhm.
So I didn't come from a military family. You know, all of this stuff was foreign to me. When I was marrying my husband, who I met where I worked, as it happened, I was working for the government, and he was, you know, was stationed there for a while. I didn't really see why people made such a big deal out of it. You know, it was in the late 90s. The last 20 years are among the most peaceful time in, you know, American history, let alone world history. And I was doing great. You know, I had a great job and was kind of crushing it in my career, and met this fantastic man, was marrying him. We got married. I got pregnant right away. And boom, we got orders to Okinawa. And I have to tell you, I think for me and for a lot of military spouses, it's very confusing coming into the military, because you're coming from America. You're coming from this land of freedom and self-actualization and rights that every American who's not in the military lives in. And it's hard to kind of understand that your life is going to change. You don't really have any say in it. And the way it's going to change is going to have a great deal of effect on your personal life. And really, nobody cares. It's besides the point. I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying that it's a radical change. It's confusing based on how you've lived your life up to that point. So I went to great college, great graduate school, had great jobs. As I said, I was doing really well. And then I was a unemployed spouse of a mid-grade officer on a little rock in the middle of the Pacific that no one's ever heard of before. But it was more than that. My daughter was born with a hole in her heart. So while we were packing up to move and figuring out this next step and selling our apartment, we were also getting her diagnosed. She ended up having open heart surgery when she was 2 months old. And that's really scary. You have this little baby sprayed out on the table. And we were PCS homeless. Like, we didn't have a house at that point. And my husband had orders, and he had to show up in Okinawa, and he did. So there I was by myself, trying to stay with various friends and families, waiting for the baby to get strong enough, praying that she was going to get strong enough that we could move over there. And then when we did, he was on unaccompanied orders, but you know, I'm not a big one for following rules, so I was not going to be away from him with this infant. This is our first year of marriage, bear in mind. You know, we've been married less than a year at this point. So we went over there, and I was living in a neighborhood with people who didn't speak my language, 7,000 miles from family and friends, unemployed for the first time in my life, so the first time since I was a teenager. And it was hard. It was really hard, and it was really confusing. And I made my way through that. We moved the next year to San Diego. I enrolled in law school. Again, I'd lost my career, so I had to find a new way forward. Had a second baby. I had a scholarship. I had to keep that scholarship for law school to be free, and we didn't have the money to pay for law school for me. 9/11 happened. He deployed. I was a single mom, far from family and friends, had to stay in the top 5% of my class. And I had another C-section. I had to take care of an infant by myself in this place. And I had to support my husband so that he could do this really heavy job he had to do for our nation. It requires so much of us. And if any time I couldn't have done it, my husband would have stopped. I didn't want him to stop, because I actually really cared about his mission, and I cared about the people he worked with. And I think he's awesome, and I thought they were better off with him. Yeah. But it required so much of me. And it required more from me that our country should ask of people. Right? And the solution is easy, but it's hard. The easy part of it is that all it takes is people knowing that all of us, we military families, we're in your community, we're not living on installations, we're dealing with these kind of struggles all the time, and we need friends and neighbors. People solve their problems with friends and neighbors. You have to know that we're there, you have to care that we're there, and you have to help us. That's the easy part. The hard part is, how do you make that happen? And that's what Blue Star Families is about, because you need something that makes that easy to happen. Magic can't make things happen. The individual military family members that's going through this, they can't solve all these problems for themselves. We need something new. And that's what Blue Star Families is trying to be. We're trying to be that new institution that you can come to for help and for fellowship and for how do I fit into this community? And that if you're living in that community, you're a veteran or you're just someone who cares, and you say, I know I've got military connected people here. How do I save them from the loneliness and the confusion that comes from these? I had 9 moves in 16 years. How do I help? Blue Star Families wants to be in the center of that. We want to do that matchmaking, and where we do exist, it works. We measure everything we do. It's tremendously thrilling to be part of a solution, and we're just on a path to grow.
First of all, I love what you're doing. I think this is fantastic. I feel like people don't take into account what it takes to be a military spouse, especially when things aren't. I mean, for you, not to underplay what you went through, because you did also have going through school on, but what's heartbreaking about this is your story isn't alone. You know, there are loads of people, and in my story, I was injured in Iraq in 2004, and my wife spent, a 1.5 years in the hospital with me, raising a 3-month-old daughter that I held for the first time in the hospital. I can't imagine what that was like for her, because it was tough for me to do what I was doing. And I think the physical labor of what I did was probably harder, but I believe the emotional labor of being a brand new mother and not knowing how to help me, because my needs were different from day to day.
Yeah.
How does she still allow herself to be herself while giving up so much and sacrificing so much? And so I think that it's incredible what you're doing. I think that it's so much a vacuum that needs filled, and I appreciate what you're doing. So, but I wanted to ask you, you've mentioned, previously that Blue Star Families works closely with the Department of Defense and corporate partners to address these military family needs. So I want to know what it was like dunking yourself headfirst in the vat of red tape.
Yeah.
How was that learning curve? Because I cannot imagine. I have, what little I've done through politics has been, it seemed to me, a very clear, there is no downside to this. This costs you very little. In fact, things, for instance, with service dogs, it doesn't cost the government to approve service dogs. Organizations will handle this stuff. All they have to do is allow it. And people are getting, like, people who have dogs, they have less medical needs. They live longer. They're happier. Their depression is better. Their like pill use drops by 20 or 30%. Sometimes people don't even take pills anymore. Like, what is it like to step into this crazy world out of what I'm assuming was you being a lawyer, you kind of probably had some heads up, but I'd love to hear about the learning curve of jumping into this vat of red tape.
So, Joe, I think one of the reasons I felt like it was my job to do this is that it wasn't new to me. I have a really unusual background as a military spouse. First of all, I got married. I met my husband when I was 30. And when I married him when I was 33. So I had worked in politics and government. I had been I had outranked him by a lot at the Department of Defense. I had been
good.
Acting.
We know who wears the blazer in that relationship.
Well, no, I wouldn't go that far. He's a very very equal partner and better than most. But I was acting principal assistant deputy undersecretary of defense for industrial affairs and installations, and what we did outsourcing and privatization. We looked at how to do management reform at the Pentagon, and so I knew the Pentagon and I knew how it worked. I'd worked at the White House in the past. I'd worked in the foundation world, and worked in politics. So I understood a lot about how the world worked, and I worked across sector. And then later on, after we got married and I became a lawyer, I actually worked for a venture capital firm. So I knew a lot about, before Blue Star Family started, I learned a lot about how the business world worked. And being a lawyer is fabulous. I recommend it to anybody. It turns out our whole society is based on laws. And if you know them, then you understand a lot more about how things work. So I could see, because I knew all these different languages, the language of bureaucracy, the language of politics, the language of law, how you could thread the needle to get through to things that is very, very impenetrable if you don't have that background. And how many people have that background? It's just kind of a crazy happenstance that I did.
Yeah.
I knew for one, it was very frustrating to me when my husband's unit was deployed, and I knew people who could help us, and I was told by the ethics attorneys that I'm forbidden for asking for help because I'm associated with a military unit, and that's an ethics violation. But I also know I can be that exact same person, and I can create the legal structure of a 501c3. And when I sit underneath that structure, I'm allowed to ask. And so Blue Star Families gives me a legal way to ask people for help. And that was really one of all I wanted to do at the beginning. I did not want to create an enormous organization. I wanted to stay on the board, have maybe one paid person. And I just wanted to get data so that we weren't making stuff up, get data. What are people's really problems? And are the things we're trying making any difference? That I wanted to get data, and I just wanted to ask people for help, because I knew that if I could say, look what folks are going through, won't you help them? They would say, of course, of course. And that's really why Blue Star Families was able to grow so much, is because people do say that. So we've got Starbucks, we've got, Ford Motor Company doing Bronco off-road rodeos for us, taking military folks and their families. We just go out and we ask, we say, what can you do that we would love? Let's make partnerships, right? And also, career stuff. We have this whole 4+1 pledge to get employers to shape themselves to be better for military spouses. We are able, under that umbrella, to come up with solutions that actually work for our various partners. And that includes the Department of Defense. They're still a pain in the neck to deal with.
Yeah.
But we have to always say, hey, you guys, what is a win for you? What's a win for you, Department of Health Agency? What is a Congress beating you up about? What does your boss want to see?
Oh yeah.
Commander. And then here's how I can do that for you. Here's how I can solve your problem for you in a way that just happens to help the military families I'm trying to serve.
So I know you served, White House, Department of Defense. I just did not know that this was prior. I thought that all this sort of
happened after.
It's so incredible. You're like a unicorn. You're like in the right place at the right time with the right background. And even more beautifully,
I had to do it, right?
You saw a need and you stepped into it. Well, you say that, but there are many people who don't. There are many people who, I don't know that I would, I'm a very strong second, but I don't know that I could ever be a first. If I hear you're doing something, I'm like, what can I do to help you be successful? That's so cool. Thank you so much for answering.
Well, you talked about data. And my ears perked up on that because
Star Trek, right?
No, Joe, no. Data as in numbers. Because the one thing that really sparked my attention when I was exploring Blue Star Families was unemployment among spouses. And that's the one thing that I noticed throughout my military career was because of the stress of moves and the sorry lack of childcare for spouses. And that always falls on the spouse. Always, because if a child gets sick or they get called out of school,
crazy.
It's the non-military member, the spouse, has to take care of the child. So the one thing that I really keyed in on was the GI Bill for childcare that really piqued my interest, because when I saw the data, it says on the website that unemployment still remains 3 to 4 times higher for military spouses. Can you talk to me a little bit about the GI Bill for childcare and what Blue Star or the Blue Star Families is doing and what that is all about?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Military spouse unemployment, huge problem for military families. It's bad for the military spouses, right? Because it's a morale hit when you're trained and you're not able to work and you can't contribute to your family. It destabilizes the family. And then it's tough for the veteran on transition because you don't have that second income to carry you through, and it puts everyone at a great deal of risk. Also, we see the spouses who are working, they're the ones who feel connected to their community. These are families who don't have financial insecurity, and they tend to not have as many mental health problems. So it's a huge win for everybody, right? Why aren't they working? I mean, the number one reason really is childcare. And along with it is this, service member unpredictability of their job and the moves, but childcare being number one. And that's a really hard thing to solve for. Having done research, we are very interested in piloting this idea of a GI Bill for childcare, which basically says you would be entitled as a military family to 9 months of subsidized childcare for all of the children in your family one time. With the idea is that would give you the enough time to look for work, get a job, start work, get some savings, and then take over the childcare on your own. Because once you've got that job, you can pay for childcare. Doesn't need to be a forever entitlement. And our theory is, and what we want to test with the GI Bill for childcare pilot is, let's check in on these families 2 years, 3 years later and find out, are they self-sufficient financially? Are they actually paying more taxes? Are they actually more likely to stay in service and therefore save the taxpayer money on the, retention loss? Because we actually think that this investment by the country would pay back in spades and therefore would be something worth doing. So that's really the idea behind it. And that's really the attitude we'd like to come into things. Let's theorize, let's make it, budget neutral or positive, and let's test it and let's see what we find. What we were able to work a lot with the Quality of Life panel and the House Armed Services Committee, bipartisan panel, helping them understand the challenges of military life and looking at some solutions. And they actually did write into the NDAA 9 months of subsidized childcare for military families. We don't know if it's going to pass or not. It's not the free childcare that we were looking for, but it's heavily, heavily subsidized. So we're very grateful for that. We think it's really worthwhile. If it passes, we're going to be excited about it. If it doesn't, we'll come back again and keep fighting.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's on the table now. They'll never get rid of it now. It's going to come back till they pass it.
We're good on the hill.
So, you speak on the importance of building a total family force.
Yes.
Where the families of service members are recognized as part of their military strength. And you touched upon that just a moment ago when you spoke about the benefits, the long-term benefits and the savings of supporting these families so that military life is more sustainable. Unfortunately, especially over the past 4 or 5 years, you almost have to have dual income to survive. It's really tough. I don't know how kids are moving out. It breaks my heart. I'd love to be the old grouchy guy that's like, pick yourself up by the bootstraps. But I think that anybody with a modicum of self-awareness can admit things are really tough right now. It's really tough. So I agree 100% when you say the total family force, and that family doesn't always mean just blood or marriage. We built a very small family when I was in California, and we had one of the most lovely Thanksgivings. And it was just a group of young men and women and, my wife, and it was just us togetherness. And there was so much love and support.
That's
so
right.
Can you share a little bit about what that means to you and how, as this program has grown and you've learned to navigate through some of this stuff, one, how you saw that need originally, because I know that you touched on that, but I'm wondering about the more personal side of things. Like, at what point did you feel that loneliness, I guess, in some way, and it's not just needing help. Sometimes it's just needing love. Sometimes it's like you don't have the support system that you want, and how you navigated through that on your own and was able to incorporate that into helping other people. Because I think that hearing a little bit about your personal story instead of just, the need of things is, I think, something that I'm really curious about myself.
Yeah. No, I love that question. And it kind of comes in 2 stages, because it's first, I think, about myself, and then also about understanding military service. Because, like I said, I did not come from a military family. So it took me a while to even be comfortable calling myself a military spouse, because that's such a weird phrase. Like, no one calls themselves a lawyer spouse or a plumber spouse. Like,
shoot, I would.
It's So
My wife's a lawyer. I'm a lawyer's spouse. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But the loneliness hit me right at the beginning, and it was like out of the blue because I'm an expeditionary kind of a gal. I worked traveling around the world. I traveled by myself around the world. I've had big jobs, but then I moved with my husband and my baby to Okinawa, less than a year after marriage, and I had no agency. I wasn't in Okinawa because there was a reason for Kathy Roth-Douquet to be in Okinawa. I was there because I was there because I didn't want to be without my husband, but I had no standing there. Like I had no value to anybody there. And I was the mother of this infant, and I didn't know how to do that. And if you had an infant, if you're not a naturally gifted parent of a toddler, that's like, what do I do with this? Like I'm not really very good at this,
Yeah.
And I had had some super fancy jobs. I worked for the president of the United States. I worked for a billionaire, and I gave his money away. And if you want to know how to be popular with a group of people, be a person who works for a billionaire and give their money away. So everybody took my calls. Then
if you know any, let me know.
Yeah. And then I was like, again, wife of a mid-grade officer without a job on a little rock that no one ever heard of. And no one was really interested in me or taking my calls. And who was I? What did I do when I got up in the morning? Where was my value? It was boot camp for me because my whole identity was torn down, and I had to figure out who was I in the absence of all of those things. But just like boot camp, you have to build yourself back up. And you're much stronger afterwards, because for me, then it was learning that my value isn't what other people think it is.
Yeah.
You know
what stuck out? What stuck out to me that you keep saying is, you said you got married at, you met your husband at 30. You got married at what, 32, 33?
33, yeah. So
if you think about, the average enlistee is probably marrying around, I think I read a statistic once that it was between 22 and 24. So taking that into account, I'm not saying that at the age of 33 you were ancient, but if you think about how, honestly,
I'd love to be 33.
Said I had a geriatric pregnancy, which
I know, isn't it sad? To hell with those doctors. But I was 17.
What do they know?
I was 17 when I enlisted. I was 27 when I got out. I felt ancient by the time I got out. So if you think about the maturity level between those 10 years, how young you were at 20. If you think about a 22-year-old gal, and you talk about no agency, imagine how vulnerable, if you think about if you took 10 years off of that age, and how much more insecure without connection and vulnerability, just how important Blue Star Families is to the vulnerable.
Yes.
What you're doing is so important. And I've heard so many stories over the course of doing my own work through the Veterans Portrait Project and through After Action. I've heard countless stories of family struggles, and I imagine that the work that you're going to do is going to be so impactful and is impactful. And one of the things that I've heard, or that I read, was on your website too, was that a staggering amount, 600,000 military family members move and settle worldwide every year. Or is it, and that you found a way to honor this through a thing called Welcome Week. Can you talk to me about the genesis of this and what it is exactly?
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk to you about this. And you're talking about the loneliness, and I felt it over and over again. Every time we moved, I felt it. And loneliness is tough, right? And then and I felt that compassion for my community, because I know that, like you said, I'm older. I've got a lot of education. I've got a lot of networks. I've got a lot of things in my corner. And with all of that, life was tough for me. And so what was it like for people without that? And that's the idea of wanting to start this. We started Blue Star Families really with just doing some surveys. No one was doing military family surveys at that time. We were the first ones to get some data. And we started to, and what I want to always do is ask questions about what I'm seeing. I want to interrogate myself and interrogate what we're doing. I have a background in this, in policy and from the venture capital world. You don't take what you get at face value, right? And also, I don't want to do this work if it's not making a difference, because I have other things to do, right? I only want to do this if it works. So we started doing these surveys, and we saw this like high, and it's a little bit of a long answer, so bear with me. We started seeing these high levels of financial insecurity, these high levels of mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. But there was a level that I was sort of feeling like, wait a minute, this actually doesn't make sense. We should not have higher levels than the civilian counterparts, because we're actually very advantaged compared to them. We're much more educated than they are. Military, including military spouses, are almost twice as educated. We're much more likely to be married. Someone in our family definitely has a job, otherwise we wouldn't be a military family member. We have healthcare. We have all these behavioral determinant of health things on the plus side. We should not have such high challenges here. So why do we? So the first question is it the military mission? Is it combat? Is it, whatever? But we looked at that, and actually that is more motivating to people than it is distressing. People actually choose to do this work. It's an all-volunteer force. And when you're doing it, you feel like you're doing something important that matters. So what is it? And we asked questions, and we looked again and again. And we asked people how many people they knew in the communities where they lived that could help them if they had a problem. Mm-hmm. And this rang true for me when we found this out, because what happens is people move over and over again, and their trust networks break. And they break again, and they break again. And it turns out people solve problems through people they know. So I'm like a super connector. I know so many people, but if they're not there in my community, I'm not going to know how to find help for my kid, find help for myself, find a job. And that's when we realized the real underlying issue. We don't need to train people on, how to better balance your checkbook, or necessarily hire more, therapists. We need to get upstream of it and say, it's these broken connections. How do we help people build trust networks? What we saw when we first started was that 70% of military families did not feel a sense of belonging in the communities where they lived. We looked at those who did, that 30% who did. What can we learn from them? Well, first of all, they don't have financial insecurity. They don't have mental health problems. They are disproportionately likely to be employed in their community, because it turns out being employed in your community gives you a sense of community. And they disproportionately had really good experiences in their schools. Schools can be this hugely welcoming place for the entire family if they do it well. And then the ones who didn't had all the bad things happen to them. So how do you help people feel that they belong? And then we realized that the majority of people move in the summer. And we know from other external research that if you have a positive experience early on in a new place, all things go well. If you go for a period without a positive experience, you'll stay disconnected the whole time. So we wanted to try to create a moment of welcome. Shortly after people move, Welcome Week is at the end of September, and we need to tell the story. We need to aggregate the number of people who move, explain to communities, you've got all these military connected folks in your community. They're at risk of being isolated, but you can make a difference by participating in Welcome Week, rolling out the red carpet. It's something that can happen in schools, in libraries, in workplaces, with the city leaders. Help people get to know and feel connected to their community. And then you've gone upstream and you've solved problems before the symptoms ever even hit.
Yeah. So is that something like the American Legion, a local American Legion post can host, like a Welcome Week at American Legion post?
100%. It's the perfect place to do it. And where we have chapters, we would love to integrate all the American Legion posts where our chapters have executive directors and program managers. We have outposts, which are nonprofits where we give them some funding to do our programming. But even if we have no actual presence there, an American Legion post, we can advertise that, and we can help connect the military connected people. These are active guard and reserved, as well as transitioning service members and their families who can get pulled in. And I think it's a perfect thing for the American Legion post. We'd love to build that program.
Where would an American Legion post find information to find out more about hosting a Welcome Week?
Yeah, so just at our website, Blue Star Families, Google Blue Star Families, bluestarfam.org. There's Welcome Week right on the front page. You click on it. We also have an app called the Blue Star Neighborhood. And you can find a lot of information about Welcome Week on there as well. we have 300,000 families who are registered in our membership nationwide, and 1.5 million people who use the programs and resources every year.
Nice.
I love data. I don't know what has happened to me, because I was a kid that grew up reading like Dean Koontz and Stephen King because I had no attention span whatsoever. And that was my way of sort of like taming my brain. But something has happened. Part of it is that I've gotten more organized in my life, which was desperately needed. But also I started writing, I started narrating, and there's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of numbers when you do these things and you don't realize it. So when you release, a story, a book, I'm more interested in where people are clicking from to read my story than I am who they are. I want to know where they came from. What was it that made them say, hey, I want to read this?
Yeah.
And so what you're doing, that data that you're explaining, it is makes so much sense when it's one of those things, those frustrating things that you don't realize, you just subconsciously know, and you don't realize it needs to be said until someone says it. And you're like, this is a huge problem.
Right.
That isolation that you're talking about. I mean, it's common sense once you say it out loud that way, but people just move past it because they've got their own stuff going on.
Yeah.
And despite whether you're the type of person that's very social, when you move into a neighborhood and a neighbor stops by and introduces themselves, it makes you feel connected and loved.
Right.
And as a military member, and I think even as a spouse, you're caught up in this mindset of not wanting to be the weak link, of not having needs, of pushing your needs away.
Right.
And I think that when you moved to Okinawa, you didn't want to be the squeaky wheel. You just wanted him to be able to focus on what he needed to focus on. And it put you in a bad spot.
Yeah.
And again, your story, my story, Stacy's story, we're not special snowflakes. And it's heartbreaking. Like it's kind of warming to know that we're not alone in the worst bittersweet kind of way. So I think that one thing that I want to touch on is kind of my last question is, if so many people feel, if I'm somebody who really works to try to recognize problems like this, and even I had not known how to put something like this into question, how do you deal with these leaders in America who don't even know people that are serving in the military? And it makes it harder for them to even understand these military family challenges. And I agree with you that I think there are probably some listeners who would love for you to expand on that. But how has Blue Star Families worked to sort of bridge this civil military divide? For working for America's Vet Dogs and doing stuff with that, a dog makes me feel connected to the people around me because we have a talking point.
Yeah.
How do you do that with Blue Star Families?
Yeah. So this is really my job. It's my job to tell this story, right? It's my job to build this bridge so that people can understand, because it's in all of our interest. So I do, I talk to people a lot about it, and I think I can be a good entry place in, because I'm the person who didn't know the military and didn't really care about the military. So I get where they're coming from. It's not their fault. They haven't been, or we haven't in civics in our society kind of drawn the line between what our lives are in America and why it is that we have a military and what it is that military does. And we actually have to do that. We have this crazy experiment, this self-governing society. No one ever had it before. We have it for the first time. And it really matters. And I know that from my own family, because I have four grandparents who immigrated in the 1920s. All of them came from Eastern Europe, from countries where they did not have civil rights. They didn't have the right to vote. They didn't have the right to control their property. They didn't have the right to keep a job. And actually, none of their generations before did either, because in those countries, they just didn't have civil rights. And life was not good. And then they came here, all four grandparents, and their descendants have had an amazing life, because in this country, we do have rights and we do get to pursue our dreams. And what flowers because of it is beautiful. But it rests on a ladder. The good society rests on a ladder. It starts with security, because if you don't have security, you can't have any stability. The laws and the regulations and everything where we can count on the future. And if you don't have that stability, which is what I was part of as a lawyer or in government, then you can't have prosperity, because prosperity, the ability to start and run a small business or to have a company grow, or all those things that create a surplus. Prosperity is the next step for freedom. You need prosperity for freedom, because freedom is expensive. I was a lawyer, you need to have laws and enforcement and appeals and all kinds of process. You need to have welfare systems. All this stuff requires prosperity. We don't enjoy the innovation, the art, the justice that we all love without that ladder. Security, stability, prosperity, freedom. Well, someone has to give up voluntarily some of that freedom to provide the security, that bottom rung of the ladder for the rest of us. That is a fantastic thing that some people do it. And they do it because they love this country, but they also love their families. And as much as you love your country, you love your family more. And if it's too hard on your family, you're just going to not keep doing it. So all of us up here in the freedom rung need to take care of those folks on the security rung so that they can keep the whole thing alive for all of us. We want to do it, but we also need to do it.
Yeah. Well, I know when you were sharing a bit about your experience, maybe you didn't intend to, but you were a bit dismissive about your own sacrifices and what you gave to this country. And I'm here to set you a little bit straight, Kathy.
Course correction.
What you gave was a lot. And for all the spouses out there who are backing a military member who has served or is serving, a shout out to all of you, because it all counts and it all matters. And we're only as strong as we are together. It all counts. And so, Kathy, thank you for your service to our country as well. And thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, Joe asked me a question before I didn't really get to answer, but I would love to if we have time.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Please, by all means. Yeah.
It was about love. And to me, that's the core of this whole thing. Yeah. And, and I think particularly about when my husband was deployed to Iraq in 2004, and he was commanding a assault squadron. And what they were doing was they were bringing Marines into the fight, and they were rescuing Marines out of the fight, and they were also interdicting some bad guys with some of the three-letter agency guys, and people were trying really hard to kill him. He was in a situation where he had rocket propelled grenades going through the skin of his helicopter as part of his job, and I love this guy.
Yeah.
And I'm living in Jacksonville, North Carolina, which is a place I swore I would never live. And my 2.5-year-old wasn't sleeping through the night because he didn't understand where his dad was. So he'd wake up in the middle of the night and walk through the house and call out his name and try to find him. And, again, I had lost another job, and we're living pretty close to the bone. And I'm aware that we're volunteers, and I'm aware that I can stop us from doing it at any time. And I really, really don't want my husband to get killed. So I had to ask myself, sitting in that, kind of one step up from a trailer house, that I was living in. And why am I doing this? Right? I'm choosing to do this. So why am I doing this? I had to ask myself that question. And the answer was and is love. I love my husband. And he's really excellent at what he does. And because I love him, I have this access to loving the people he works with. I got to know them while they were training, and the steps in the Marine Corps in the hangar, they have words like courage and loyalty and commitment on every rung of the stairs. How do you not love that? And I thought that they were better off with him there than they would have been if he wasn't. I knew that they were. And I love them, and I don't want them to be hurt. So I want him to do that. I do love this country. I know what it gave to me and my family. And so that's why we do it. We do it for love. And we're lucky. We're lucky to be close to such a big feeling and to such a big cause. And it really is a privilege to be able to do it. I don't think anyone who does it wants to be thanked for doing this wonderful thing that's full of privilege, but we do want to be supported in the things that are tough. We do want to be able to just get that second income so our families can have dignity, right? We do want the kids to be okay. My daughter went to 10 different schools by the time she was in 10th grade. That's hard on a kid. How can we make that easier? So we want to uplift the very best parts of it, and we just want a little help with the hard part.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being so like earnest with us.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. That was powerful.
We have your social handles and links that you've talked about on the show. Is there a website where the Alphas can go to learn more about your work?
We would love them. Veterans are part of our network. We'd love you to join us. bluestarfamilies.org. Joining is free, no obligation. We have a lot of great things of support we bring to veterans as well. We do an amazing, actually, support circle work with suicide prevention, and
Nice.
Love to have people know more about that. And we'd love to bring people into our chapters and into the fellowship that we provide all around.
I can't thank you enough for being here. It's so clear and obvious that you are so emotionally and heartfeltly invested in what you're doing, and you are making an impact. Because like you said, you could be doing something else. If this isn't working,
yeah,
you know, it makes sense logically to move on. Maybe something else would work. And so, but let me tell you that you're making an impact. And if nothing else, the education of people realizing this is a problem plants a seed of people realizing that it's not a problem that goes away. It's a problem that needs fixed. You know, this is a flat tire going down the highway. We're going about 80 miles an hour. Like, this can go real south real fast without the right things going right. And you're making things go right. So before we sign off, though, is there anything else you want to share with our Alphas that we didn't discuss?
Just super great to talk to both of you. I'd love to make the relationship with the Legion closer. Really value all that you guys do. Hope that we get to talk again. It was super fun doing it. So really, thanks for spending time with me.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks for being with us. Alphas, be sure to check out the Blue Star Families. And in the meantime, stick around for some Scuttlebutt after the break.
As a veteran, you've done more than your fair share of providing support. Now it's our turn. Introducing the WellCare and the American Legion Partnership and the WellCare Medicare Advantage plans that give you more support, more access, and more benefits in addition to your VA benefits. Visit wellcareforveterans.com today or call 844-917-1165. Ohana Health Plan, a plan offered by WellCare Health Insurance of Arizona, Inc. New Mexico Dual Eligible Special Needs Plan, DSNP members. As a WellCare by Allwell DSNP member, you have coverage from both Medicare and Medicaid. Medicaid services are funded in part by the state of New Mexico. New Mexico Medicaid benefits may be limited to payment of Medicare premiums for some members.
Okay, Alphas, we hope you had a great break. Now it's time for some Scuttlebutt.
With Halloween right around the corner. Before we get started on that, have you seen Beetlejuice?
I have not. I've heard some mixed reviews, but I'm anxiously awaiting to see it on streaming. Oh,
I thought that it was fantastic because, one, like the first one, it doesn't take itself too seriously. Of course, I'm not going to spoil anything.
Please don't.
But number two, Monica frickin' Bellucci. Oh my goodness. She just stays beautiful.
Cast. Yeah.
Yeah. And everybody there's just rock stars. I mean, honestly, it was really cool. I enjoyed it. I thought that it gave plenty of nods to the old story. I think that it did justice to everything. You got a beloved, I don't even know how old, 25-year-old story. I don't know. I'm old now. You're not going to make everybody happy. You're just not.
Yeah.
But having said that, Halloween is right around the corner. And I thought it would be fun to explore what military members around the world are up to celebrate this holiday. So check out some of the top military-inspired costumes this year and see what people's opinions are about the idea of G.I. Joe, or more like G.I. No, you didn't. To gather my intel, I was inspired by Stacy and went to Reddit to see what's up.
Oh,
so that place is dangerous. You can get stuck there for hours.
It's good. Yeah.
But whenever you want like a review of just a normal person using something, because like that's more my speed. I don't need a high-tech YouTube guru telling me, oh, this is great if you use it for something that I've never even heard of. I need like my name's Billy. I live in Central Georgia, and it worked for what I wanted it for. Yeah. That's what I'm looking for.
Me too.
So at Trend Warrior 101 asked, Halloween is coming, and I never hear what the military does for Halloween, be it here in America or deployed overseas. And at G. Graysimmer 15 said, our CO has a yearly uniform inspection, and he gives us the choice of wearing costumes. Which I think is so fun. Is so fun. I think that is the funnest idea, because the whole thing is like, you have to be serious. So everyone's standing there dressed up like dinosaurs and like all sorts of nonsense. And like, I can imagine that guy's a pretty fun guy to have as your CO. But last year, the whole rescue swimmer dressed up as a roller derby team with wigs, tie-dye shirts, and roller skates. Link 371 said, we sacrifice an E1 on a burning spear to the god of death. That is standard and is not supposed to be shared. And
I know that seems like some inside baseball that shouldn't be made public.
Yeah, the Lance Corporal Underground will be after him. He's on borrowed time. Unsuitable Sickburn responded, we aren't some dystopian future robots with no minds. We're people too. Well, some of us are crayon eaters. Still people, arguably. So let's talk about the most popular uniform costume. So now, for any of you who've had a kid or grandkid who wants to wear the uniform Uncle Sam's bravest, let's talk about the line between honor and stolen valor. So Reddit has lots of resources, of course, but mostly the same general opinions in the end. R, just the letter R, no stupid questions, which is debatable, ask, is dressing up as a soldier for Halloween disrespectful and stolen valor? That's actually not a stupid question. That's a really good question, because it shows that you care.
Yeah.
And before we really get into it, I know that there are rules and regulations, but I think a lot of it comes down to intent. If you see a little kid and his name tag's on the wrong side, you're not going to dress him down in front of his family at the door. Like there's a time and place for that stuff. Or you see somebody that's like special needs and, or something like that, or is nonverbal, like they're wanting to participate in the most that they're wanting is to feel included in something really great and maybe get some candy. Yeah. So having said all that, at the Game Boy Path said, if you're wearing the standard uniform of a modern day soldier, expect specifications. Exact specifications. If it were like a borrowed from a real life soldier, you may have some people take issues with your costume. And I agree with that. If you're walking around, like half-cocked soldier boy, with something on and people, not soldier boy, the artist, I'm just saying like you're being a soldier boy.
Like an exact service dress uniform.
Yeah, but you're also wearing like hookahs or something, or hokas. So if it were borrowed from a real life soldier, you may have some people take issue with the costume. If you're wearing what is very clearly a store-bought Halloween costume with its exaggerated or cheap features, no one's going to take fault with you. And anybody who does is not somebody whose opinion you really need to worry about. Sure. And Extra Socks 69. Number one, I want to know the story behind that name. Number two,
hilarious.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I had one for a little while that was 404 Zelda not found, because it's always Link not found.
Mm-hmm. That's funny.
And no one ever thought that it was funny. I'm like, if I saw that, I would think it was brilliant. But of course I think I'm brilliant. Like
my mom used to call me Space Cadet when I was a kid. So my handle used to be SLP_ Space Cadet.
I like that. Yeah. I like that. So at Extra Socks 69 responded, so long as you're not actively trying to impersonate being a member of the military, you should be fine. So if your little one wants to dress up, you can get some good graces at the local, good pieces at the local surplus shop.
Yeah, I think you talked about what are some of the most popular uniform costumes. I think what I was reading was Maverick was pretty popular because of the Top Gun movie. Of course, G.I. Joe never goes out of style. I think whatever you find on the shelf for like pilots, pretty popular. And the closer to the bases you are, I think you're going to find the sort of like little cheap knockoff uniform ones. But surplus shops, you can find those in abundance.
You can usually guess what you're going to see on the street based off of what movies have been super popular, and so what I love is the like double meta where you have someone dressed up as the Ghostbusters, but they're not dressed up as the Ghostbusters. They're actually dressed up as the Stranger Things characters that are dressed up like the Ghostbusters. So it's like you have two costumes in one.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
My favorite at Dragon Con. This is my favorite costume because I think it's a philosophical question. It is the most complex costume you can see. Have you seen the movie Tropic Thunder?
Yes.
So if you see a African-American male wearing the Lincoln costume, is he Robert Downey Jr.? Is he the Australian actor that Robert Downey Jr. is playing? Is he Lincoln from the movie? Or like, do you see what I'm saying? It's actually a fairly complex question.
That is very. Have you ever asked them directly, like, "Hey, who are you playing?"
No, because I saw two of them and they were like dressed up perfectly, two Lincolns, and I just stared at them and it like triggered this really deep, weirdly, like sometimes when you're like, I'm way overthinking this, but I thought it was a
really crazy sidebar. Now, I had no idea exactly what Tropic Thunder was, and our youngest child, who was 13 at the time, and I'm really sad to admit this, all you alphas out there who've never seen Tropic Thunder, it is one of the most appallingly R-rated movies, which I guess I should be aware that I don't hide anything from my children. R-rated, to me, some R-rated movies are just because of F-bombs and things like that. Yeah. So I don't necessarily worry about a lot of F-bombs from my kids because they hear enough of that from my own mouth at home, sadly.
And Charlie's a big cusser.
My service dog, is a big time cusser. So anyway, when my youngest said, "Hey, I want to see Tropic Thunder," I didn't really do my due diligence, and we ended up in the movie. Well, within the first 30 seconds, I know Joe, for any of you who can't see Joe's face right now, he's like, "You are the worst parent ever."
No, we've all made that mistake. We've all made that mistake.
Within the first 30 seconds, there's scantily clad women with the opening sequence of women screaming booty sweat and grinding in front of, and I was like, I looked over at my husband and then looked past my husband at my youngest and was like, what are we watching right now? Anyway, do yourself a favor, don't watch Tropic Thunder, or do, and then you'll realize what we're talking about. So anyway,
I would say that it's our generation's military Blazing Saddles. It's that controversial.
Yes, yeah, it's satirical as well. So
and I think that it holds up, I think, classically too. I mean, I really do believe that it pushed the bar. Someone asked one time Mel Brooks about making that movie, and they were like, "You couldn't make that now." And he said something really interesting, which I think applies to this. We couldn't make it then.
True. Yeah.
I mean, when you go into something with an open, like, look at Family Guy, look at, they make fun of everyone. And I think if you go into it sincerely, and you're not there to be hurtful, I think that humor goes a long way. I know in the military, the humor is so dark. I mean, the literally sometimes the way we say, "Stacy, I love you so much, please be careful," is don't get shot in the face.
Oh yeah, I would never take that as a mean or like prophetic saying. To me, that's comes from a place of love. Yeah, somebody from the outside may be like, "Dude, why would you say that?" Yeah,
that's how we say "I love you." It's a weird defense mechanism.
Oh no!
But there you go. Now you know.
Happy Halloween! Trick or treat! Don't take one in the face while you're out trick or treating, guys and gals and little ones.
Gosh.
We wish you a safe, happy Halloween as that comes approaching. I have a story for you.
Okay. Send it.
Out in Mother Russia, they are bribing their best, or maybe their worst. So apparently Russia is getting more aggressive with their army recruitment tactics amidst rising war losses. Recruitment information booths can be found on every entrance to the metro. Also, that Russian dictator we often find riding horses topless, my favorite, Vladimir Putin, recently decreed a significant increase in their one-time payments for signing contract bonuses with the Ministry of Defense, taking it from 1,940 euros to a whopping 3,900 euros. Provincial authorities have also committed to paying an additional 400,000 rubles to those who decide to sign with a military contract, bringing that total to a whopping 800,000 rubles. That's comes to about 7,900 euros. Also, a person could be summoned to the army when they receive a, quote, invitation electronically. Of course, those who receive it cannot leave the country. So if you get a invitation, you cannot leave Mother Russia.
Welcome home.
Yeah. So when I read this article, I was like you, Joe. I took to Reddit to see what the Webbers are saying about it.
It's a series of tubes.
So that I was seeing what the Russians on Reddit were saying, and people outside of Russia, of course. At R3D3, which is a clever handle, good for you. She said the bonus is closer to $20,000 these days, and people outside of the main cities have annual incomes from $3,000 to $6,000 range. So imagine getting about 5 times your annual income just for signing up, increased monthly payments and bonuses if you survive. People coming back to their villages are people who are buying houses and cars and gadgets with money they could only dream of. It's life-changing indeed.
Yeah.
At Serafina Water also added, as a Russian from St. Petersburg, the thing is they are desperate. They want people to know that these guys actually get paid the bonus, because that's absolutely, they need them as many as possible. You walk down the street here and every second billboard is an advertisement for the contract and what other benefits, that's in quotes, you get from signing up. Now you can even earn 100,000 rubles if you are successfully persuaded someone to sign a contract. And yet every night there are young, uneducated, and poor guys on the streets drinking alcohol and asking for money and for beer and for cigarettes. There are still a ton of young military-aged males working for atrocious pay at McDonald's or cleaning streets. None of them want to go. Even with this life-changing money, that's because everyone knows that Ukraine is hell and people don't last long, even enough to enjoy it.
Yeah. And
not like their political views have changed. At Dundee said, glad to see rationalized thinking over here, and all I have been seeing here for a while is, haha, so stupid they obviously won't get paid in the end. The thing is, they will be paid. But the news like this shows that lesser and lesser people agree to join the military, even with a significant sum of money. So conscription is possible in the future. At Socialist Trobe, I don't know, T-R-O-B, Trobe.
I don't know.
The Russian civilian economy is essentially dead, but Russian life has been held together by the huge influx of wartime spending.
Yeah.
If that spending were to dry up and Russia were suddenly faced with hundreds of thousands of unemployed returning troops, massive debts, and lost war, it would create every condition for a regime change. That's pretty interesting.
That is a really, really insightful answer from Reddit, because if you think about it, their economy at this point has to be held together by war completely, almost.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, what other industries, and this is coming from ignorance. I'm saying this straight out. I don't know what imports and exports out of Russia look like, but I can't imagine that they've got loads and loads of oil or something like that that's super fiscally productive, because there's a reason why they're invading people. Like they're, you know.
Well, this conversation went on this thread was quite long and lengthy. And one of the other things that really intrigued me about this was they spoke to all of these young folks who were fighting in the Ukraine amongst other fronts.
Yeah.
And now they're going to be arguably upper middle class, if not upper class, because of the wealth they're being imparted, or at least in part.
Yeah.
Committed. They're going to come home, and if the Russian economy is tanked and these people hold the wealth, they have the power to take at least some power within the government. And if they are feeling disenfranchised, what will they do with it? It's an interesting concept.
There's every chance that, you know, when this war is over, the ruble's not going to be worth anything. You know,
True.
You know, I'm no historian, but I do know that when your government collapses, your money, there's places that, money, you can have an entire wheelbarrow full of money that you can't buy a loaf of bread with. And
well, that's under the assumption that these people are holding it on as rubles. Who's to say
that's
they don't?
True. I mean, can they buy like Dogecoin with it or something like that?
You never know. Are they opening Swiss bank accounts? Who knows? Perhaps there's embargoes from that, because who knows what kind of sanctions there are from Russian citizens from doing that. But Bitcoin or other sort of digital economy, who knows?
I don't know. I will say, I'd be asking to get paid in euro. I will say that.
Can I get that in whatever Tibetan?
Yeah, because ruble sounds like it's from like the Legend of Zelda, the little rubies that you get.
Can I get that in Monopoly money? That might be worth more than rubles after this war. All right. So we both you and I, Joe, we both went down these Reddit rabbit holes this week. That's because we're both launching our own Tango Alpha Lima subreddits. Finally, we have a place for alphas to gather after the show is over to discuss stories and interviews, hold AMA sessions with your hosts, and to access more interactive content like this. We'll have more information coming in the next few episodes, but for now, dive into the Reddit rabbit hole with us and find us at r/Tango Alpha Lima.
All right, alphas, thank you for listening. We love you. You can subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter, or send us mail and guest recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. We'll see you next week. We'll see you. We're watching.